Good evening, and welcome to Insights, powered by Barnard. My name is AJ Ehrenstein, and I serve as Dean of Beyond Barnard and Senior Advisor to the Provost here at Barnard College. Thanks for joining us tonight as we conclude the second season of Insights. Over the last 4 months, we've once again had the opportunity to get to know distinguished speakers from across industries. And if you've been following along, you'll also have heard from several of the staff who make the work that we do at Beyond Barnard possible. I hope this has been a chance for you to get familiar with the professionalism and deep commitment of our team, embodied by our team at Barnard. From discussions of public health disparities and the development of the COVID vaccine to corporate leadership, the entertainment industry, finance, and philanthropy, Insights has once again attempted to present you all with a wide range of perspectives on the most pressing issues of our time, refracted through the lens of the Barnard community. And tonight is no exception. This evening's conversation with Asahi Pompey, Global Head of Corporate Engagement and President of the Goldman Sachs Foundation, is also supported by the Francine A. Lefrak Foundation Center for Wellbeing. This distinctive center at Barnard represents the unification of initiatives that address student health and wellness, physical, mental, and financial, at the college. It seems fitting that we should come together for our final conversation and this final conversation of this spring on the night before Juneteenth, which the Barnard community will observe tomorrow, and also at the end of the summer A term. With the days at their longest, the energy and anticipation of a reopening New York are cause for celebration. Celebration of another academic year, another graduating class, and another productive and hopefully restful summer. At the same time, we're taking this moment for reflection on these last 15 months. Reflection on all that has changed and all that has stayed the same, on loss and renewal, and on the promise of uncertainty of what comes next. I hope that these events, these insight events, have provided similar opportunities to pause and consider what it really means to live in what we have become accustomed to calling unprecedented times. President Beilock will introduce our speaker, Asahi Pompey, in just a minute. But first, a few quick notes. This event is being recorded and it will be shared next week. Attendees will not have microphone or camera access during the event. Attendees' voices, likenesses, and images will not be captured by Barnard College. Written submission of questions may be shared during the Q&A portion of the event. With that in mind, I want to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance. We will do our best, as always, to get to as many questions as possible. It's now my pleasure, as always, to introduce the 8th president of Barnard, Sian Leah Beilock. President Beilock has led Barnard since 2017 after serving for 12 years at the University of Chicago. She is one of the world's leading experts on the cognitive science behind choking under pressure and performance anxiety, with a focus on math and science for women and girls. She's the author of 2 critically acclaimed books, entitled Choke and How the Body Knows Its Mind, and her 2018 TED Talk has now been viewed over 2.5 million times. Please join me in welcoming President Beilock.
Thank you, AJ, and welcome everyone to our final Insights event for this spring. Before I introduce my amazing guest, I want to just touch on something that Dean Ehrenstein talked about, which is our new Francine A. Lefrak Foundation Center for Wellbeing, because I think the ethos and the inspiration and the ideas behind the center are going to be so fully embodied tonight. This center will be a physical space in Barnard Hall, right when you walk in campus, and it will encompass physical, mental, and financial well-being for all of our students, faculty, and staff. It's really an innovative model of holistic wellness, and it's something that we've been focusing on at Barnard for a long time, but has become so much more important and apparent, especially for women during the pandemic. And tonight, I can't imagine a better speaker to come and talk about the intersection of financial wellness, equity, well-being than Asahi Pompey. She's going to be able to speak precisely to the overlap of financial education, equity, and really what financial institutions can do in the role they play in important philanthropic work. I'm so excited to have Asahi. She's currently Global Head of Corporate Engagement and President of the Goldman Sachs Foundation. And in this capacity, she serves as the firm's primary liaison with the nonprofit organizations it supports. And she also identifies new partnerships to engage with communities, furthering the firm's longstanding mission of service. Asahi also oversees efforts to leverage the firm's skills and expertise across its existing philanthropic initiatives, including 10,000 Small Businesses, 10,000 Women, Goldman Sachs Gives, the COVID-19 Relief Fund, the Goldman Sachs Fund for Racial Equity, and Community Teamworks. Since launching in 2009, the 10,000 Small Businesses program has already reached more than 10,000 businesses in the US and UK, providing practical business education, support services, and access to capital at no cost to participants. Similarly, the 10,000 Women initiative has provided a world-class business education to 10,000 plus women in more than 100 countries, also at no cost to participants. The program was informed by research showing that investing in education for women could help close a range of gender gaps and contribute to higher global economic growth. At a Goldman Sachs town hall meeting after the death of George Floyd, Asahi shared a public letter to her 11-year-old son, expressing her worries for his life and offering guidance for navigating the world while Black. Shortly after, Goldman Sachs announced a $10 billion initiative to impact at least 1 million Black women. The initiative is called, very simply, 1 Million Black Women. Asahi joined Goldman Sachs in 2006 and was named Managing Director in 2010 and Partner in 2018. She served on a number of leadership committees at the firm and was the co-chair of the firm-wide Black Network. She has served as a Managing Director ally for the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Network as well. Born in Guyana and raised in Brooklyn, with a year spent in Japan during high school, Asahi is a graduate of Swarthmore College and Columbia Law School. In April, Glamour called her the gladiator we all get to know. Tonight, I'm so excited to welcome Asahi Pompey and look forward to getting a chance for all of us to know her better. Asahi, welcome. Oh, I think.
Oh, yes. That happens at least once a day to all of us. President Beilock, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the entire Barnard community for having me as part of this really important series. So thank you so much. Thank you for such a warm introduction. And I am also have viewed your TED Talk and I'm a huge fan, so thank you.
Well, we're so happy to have you here tonight. And, you know, I want to just jump right in because your career has been so impressive. You emigrated from Guyana with your family to Brooklyn when you were around 10, and then you spent a year in Japan in high school. I'd love to hear about some of those transitions, how those experiences impacted you. I mean, certainly it's a unique trajectory to be where you are now.
You know, I think you're absolutely right. And part of my job is to make it hopefully not as unique for many others. But yes, I'm a very unlikely Goldman Sachs partner in the sense that, you know, I'm one of 5. The 7 of us came to JFK when I was 10. And I lived in the Vanderveer housing projects on the corner of Foster and Nostrand Avenue. And went to New York City's public school, PS 269 on Nostrand Avenue, and then Roy H. Mann, and then John Dewey High School in Coney Island. So I'm really sort of New York born and bred, if you will. And it's incredible. I think coming from the background I come from, I think I take a different eye to our social impact work. Frankly, I was on the receiving end of philanthropy that allowed me to go to law school, that allowed me to go to undergrad, that allowed me to live in Japan. And so to have this lens now to be able to lead these efforts, I think having that sort of more global perspective in terms of different places I've lived, and frankly, the experiences that I've had, you know, I'm sometimes an unusual voice in the room saying, I don't think we should do it that way. And I think we should be doing it differently. And I think people have been very, very open to that. And I think that's part of the Goldman Sachs secret sauce, if you will, that you have this sort of rich debate about different ideas.
And I love, you know, the idea of you being potentially an unusual voice, but making it less unusual, right? Because we know those diverse ideas and diverse perspectives are what lead to the best ideas. I mean, I think the research is pretty clear about that at this point. Whether your goal is to have an impact, make more money, be knowledgeable or all of the above. You can't do it when everyone is coming from the same place and has the same lived experience.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting being in the room and having, whether we're debating our fund for racial equity or our COVID response or, talking about HBCUs and what we're doing in terms of our commitment to HBCUs or Juneteenth over the course of today and our thinking around it, our response and all of that. And so having those multiplicities of perspectives across the room, intellectual, ethnic, racial background, socioeconomic class makes for a really, really rich discussion. Sometimes longer, sometimes harder, but harder in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about Barnard that it's not about having safe spaces, it's about having brave spaces. And I think getting used to this idea that uncomfortable conversations can be really important for pushing ideas forward, that not everyone has to come in on the same page. And it sounds like that's what you're reflecting at Goldman in many ways.
Yeah, very true.
So, I mean, tell us a bit about how you got to Swarthmore, your rise into Columbia Law School. I mean, you talked a little bit in your Glamour article, which I loved, and I grew up reading Glamour, so it's fun to go back and look at it. And you talked about, it was about figuring out how you go out and pay off your loans, what you do next. I mean, I'd love to hear what your thinking was coming out, going into college and then coming out. Well, I imagine you weren't thinking about that you would be in this role now. So it's always great to hear from leaders about where they started and the fact that we don't always start with lofty goals, and that's okay because paths change. And I think we have to keep on talking about that because we don't know where we're going to end up oftentimes.
Absolutely. And I didn't start with lofty goals at all. I mean, my goals were pretty, straightforward. Maslow's hierarchy very much was around, being able to help my family. And I remember when the way I got to Swarthmore is sort of a really interesting story in that I was trying to figure out where to go to college, and I wanted to go someplace local because the idea that I was going to be able to live on campus was just not something that I can consider. And even thinking about, the application fee, I needed an application fee waiver. And now I hear, students are applying to 12, 15 schools. That was not something I could do. You had to pay at the time, I think it was like $50. I don't know what it is right now, maybe $100. I don't know. But to really understand that it takes a certain amount of privilege even to be able to apply to 10 schools. And so that was not on my radar. I knew I had to apply to as few schools as possible and that I needed to stay, in New York City. And so I really never considered going anywhere else. And then I had this phenomenal teacher. His name is Paul Weiss. He's since passed away, who said, I think you should go to Swarthmore College. You should consider a small liberal arts school. I think it would be great for you. And I said, that sounds great, but I would need scholarship, all of that. Anyway, I applied for a bunch of scholarships. And he said, you should visit the school and interview in person. And I said, okay, that sounds great, but how is that going to come about? And I remember he said, what time does your parents get home from work? I want to drive you to Swarthmore. I want to leave you on campus. That's what students do. They go on campus, they stay there and people show them around and they stay there for a night or two and then they come back. And I said, there's no way my parents are going to let me drive to campus with my teacher. And he said, when do your parents get home from school? My wife and I are going to get home from work. My wife and I are going to come to your house. And I said, well, my dad works at Con Ed and he works the 7 to 11 shift. And he's going to be probably promptly at 11:20, Daddy walks in the door. And he said, well, I'll come at 11:30 if they would see me. And there it was. There was Mr. Weiss and his wife, Carolyn, in my home. My mom had made some Guyanese snack for them. And at the end of the night, they shook hands and they agreed that it would be okay for him to drive me up. But that's how I ended up to Swarthmore. And I applied early decision because I could apply to one school. And so not lofty ideas. And frankly, a lot of this is sort of, no successful person gets there alone. No one. So anyone who's been on this Inside series, I'm sure they've told you that they had help from so many people along the way. And frankly, there's so many people I don't name than the people I do name. You can only name so many. And so I think that notion of, how people get where they are, it's from the kindness, the help, people whose dreams for me were far greater than my dreams were for myself.
I love that. And Just to be clear, we also have an application fee waiver, so financial need should never be a barrier for applying to Barnard. And of course, we're need blind and we meet full need, but I think you're right that it's, people having higher expectations for you than you often have for yourself. And as a scientist and a cognitive scientist that focuses on women, I know this is often very true, that we feel like imposters or that we don't have what it takes. And it's sort of taking that jump, believing in someone else who believes in you, which is always so important. So you talk a lot now about a purpose-driven career. Can you tell me what you mean by that and how we should think about that and how students should think about that as they're, navigating their undergraduate career?
Yeah, I think there, in the past, I certainly believed in sort of a false dichotomy that people who wanted to do purpose-driven work, they worked for a nonprofit, they worked, in a different field, and people who wanted and had to or wanted to be able to create nest eggs for their family, then they went in a different direction. And there was somehow never the twain shall meet. And at some point, when you were at a particular age and you'd, accumulated enough assets and sent your kids to college and all of that, then you would be on a board and then you'd be able to do that more. That was wrong before, and it's still wrong now. But I think, in some sense, I think the younger generation is sort of leading us in a way. And I'll share a really phenomenal stat with you that I just love, President Bylock, which is that during the pandemic, the segment of the generations that gave the most was in fact millennials, right? So 75% of millennials moved with their feet and donated to some nonprofit during the pandemic. They're followed by Gen Xers at 68% and then baby boomers. And then you think about what would have been happening in a millennial's life during that time. Maybe, jobs had gone offline, maybe they'd moved, God knows what happened during that time period, but yet they found the time and also the internal motivation to do that, to move with their money. And so as we think about sort of where, Gen Z, also Gen Z has been using more of their time than their resources, if you will, because they're accumulating their resources in some cases. And so as we think about sort of purpose-driven work, I know it's a false dichotomy. I know that a place like Goldman Sachs, we do a lot of intense purpose-driven work. The largest commitment ever in this country to Black women came out of Goldman Sachs in March of this year when we announced a $10 billion commitment to improve the lives of 1 million Black women by the year 2030. And that's billion with a B, never been done before, specifically targeted to Black women. And so as we think about finding ways to feel like your values are reflected in your daily work, there's so many ways of doing it. And I have to say, Goldman's not the only place. So many corporations, and I would say the vast majority of corporations, in fact, are doing this kind of work and frankly are interested in people who want to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but I see our graduates and students coming out really pushing corporations in that way as well. It's the voices of the younger generations, Gen Z, the millennials, that are pushing corporations in a sense to not have that dichotomy, to find the value in what they're doing. And I think that's a good thing.
You're spot on. And in fact, they're not only pushing, but they're coming with their ideas. So I will get decks and proposals saying, Asahi, you're thinking, I know you're working on the Racial Equity Fund. I don't know if you decided on which organizations yet. Here's a phenomenal organization. Or I think you should do it in this way. I think you should send our people. They should have a sabbatical year where they go and get to volunteer. So they're coming with not only saying you should, but saying, I want to be a part of it. And I've got some great ideas and you should be considering it, which I love. That's the richest conversations I have.
So we won't hold it against you that you didn't go to Barnard, although we now count you as part of the Barnard family. But, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about liberal arts education and how you think it has shaped where you are today, because I think Swarthmore and Barnard have that in common. And I think it's always important when we talk about the liberal arts. I say this all the time. It's not the liberal arts and sciences. The sciences are part of the liberal arts, and we're teaching, you how to think, right? Not what to think. And how did that education for you? What was your major, and how does that shape what you do today?
Well, it's so funny because if you look back in your records, you'll see that I almost went to Barnard. After Swarthmore, interestingly enough, so I was my first semester at Swarthmore, I just didn't think I could afford it. And I thought I needed to be able to commute. And so during my first semester at Swarthmore, I applied to Barnard. You thankfully accepted me.
Oh, good. We made a right decision there.
And at the end, oh my gosh, no, it was a lifeline. And because I told my parents I'm gonna, live in Brooklyn, I'm gonna commute. And then once Swarthmore heard about it, they said, no, you can't leave. We've got to find a way to figure out your financial aid package so you can stay. But in terms of a liberal arts education, I am, oh gosh, a champion. I feel like I'm trying to get more liberal arts majors. I was a poli-sci major, to answer your question directly, to come to financial services and to think about their career paths more expansively. We need liberal arts majors at Swarthmore. We need students from liberal arts school at Goldman. And in particular, you learn how to write, and for a lot of work that we do, excellent writing is just so incredibly important. And it's differentiated with the kind of, students that are graduating from Barnard have that. I would say the second thing is that richness of learning how to debate and dissect an issue and see it from all angles. You've had that in small classroom settings, right? And I think that is very much of what happens in a corporation isn't in these big rooms with hundreds of people. It'll feel very much like your classes that you're having, right now at Barnard, where it's a small group of people that are in a room, that they've got a problem and they're going to meet on a weekly basis to solve it. That's my day at Goldman Sachs right now, right? And so that whole environment of debate and discussion and analysis is what corporations are very much about. And I think, frankly, Barnard grads and I think liberal arts majors more generally would enjoy that environment. It'll feel very familiar.
Yeah, I love that. And it's nice to think about the transition from the classroom to the corporate room. And oftentimes, I think it's hard for students to really envision what it's going to be like. So hearing about where those similarities are so great. So let's turn to some of the work that you're doing, because it's really so impressive. I'd love to talk first about the 10,000 Women Initiative. Tell us a little bit about that. It's amazing that you've really been able to connect with so many women across so many countries. How does it work? And how does it work at no cost to the participants?
Yeah, so 10,000 Women, think about it as an MBA free of charge by Goldman Sachs to women entrepreneurs in developing countries. And it was launched 13 years ago at a time where not a lot of people were talking about women entrepreneurs in Peru or women entrepreneurs in Brazil or China or India. And at that point, we did some research and found that in communities where there were women entrepreneurs, so many things happened. One is women help other women and girls. And so there was this community lift. Two is they employ men, obviously, in their communities as well. Three, you see other social change happening when a woman is a business owner. You see more girls going to school. You see women having more, not only economic power, but that economic power now leading to social power as well. And so we thought, wow, all of this from a woman owning a business is tipping the scale in so many ways, more broadly across communities, and it has an intergenerational, multi-generational impact. And so as a result of that, we said, this is an area we want to double down on because we really are into one, systemic change, and we want sustained programs. A lot of times corporations get, accused of being episodic. This is the latest news cycle. We'll dip in, we'll do that. So we've been at it now for 13 years, and we've worked with women entrepreneurs in over 100 countries, providing education, access to capital, as well as network. We find that our women entrepreneurs do business with each other, which has been fantastic as well. So if you know a woman entrepreneur in any developing market, free of charge, Goldman Sachs, 10,000 Women.
And is it in person? Is it online? How does it?
It's in person in certain markets. It was in person in about 15 different markets: Nigeria, China, Brazil. I can go on and name the whole list.
Yeah.
We've moved it online. And what we saw, and I love this question about it being online, during the pandemic, is it was one of the top courses on Coursera. Because women entrepreneurs were looking for and hungry for how to pivot, move their business, tools that they could potentially use. And so it's completely online now, and any woman can access it.
And talk a little bit about that transition to online in the pandemic. How did the pandemic, what opportunities, and I imagine lots of challenges with what you were doing. How did you make that shift?
You know, in terms of our team internally or our women entrepreneurs?
The women entrepreneurs, start there, and then we'll talk about your internal team.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you asked, because just last week we issued a new report which looked at, we surveyed our women entrepreneurs at the beginning of the pandemic, and we went back to them now and asked them in February and March sort of how they're doing. And we just published a report last week on the findings from it. Interestingly enough, a couple of things happened. Certain businesses, as you would expect, certain businesses did extraordinarily well during the pandemic, and other businesses, and actually came out ahead of where they were before, and other businesses didn't do as well. Unsurprisingly, the women were in the businesses that didn't do as well. So, you know, whether you saw a pandemic bump or a pandemic bust, women were more likely to see a pandemic bust. Now, why? Because very many of them are in the service industry. And obviously the service industry was the industry that was hardest hit. And so we see that now, where we're really in danger of erasing a lot of the progress that had been made in these communities with women entrepreneurs as a result of the pandemic. And so we've really issued a call to action around wrapping our arms around women entrepreneurs in developing markets and providing them with capital. Very often is what they need, network, buying from these women entrepreneurs, doing what we can to make sure that we don't erase a lot of the great work that they did to get to where they are.
And do you also come in with around support services for childcare or elder care? I mean, we know that a lot of women often take more responsibility in the home, and getting rid of some of those barriers could help them in terms of being entrepreneurs. Is it wraparound in that way, or you focus mostly on capital and networking?
We focus more on the education and capital. However, what we've done is we've created an advocacy platform within our 10,000 Small Businesses program, which is our US program, which advocates for legislation and policy around where our business owners say this is what they need, which effectively they've said exactly what you've said, which is we really need these wraparound services in order to be able to push our business forward. And we create forums where our business owners meet with legislators and others who can help in that area.
I mean, it's such an important topic of conversation as we talk about job loss, and women, and especially women of color, really having the majority of that job loss, to make sure that we're not erasing, you know, decades of progress we've made. I mean, not fast enough progress, but we don't want to go backwards. Yeah. So I imagine it's really on your mind as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love to talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you're thinking about diversifying the financial and services industry. You know, obviously we are thinking a lot, I think, as a country about what it means to have more voices at the table and have access to opportunity. And it seems like Goldman is really positioned to help do that. But it's something that you've taken on, I know personally, and in your leadership role. And you put yourself out there personally at a town hall. Talk about that decision. I mean, you can do things as a professional and as a leader, but to put yourself out there personally and talk about your own feelings, how do you think that affected?
Yeah, so the town hall that you referenced was a really important one. I think the firm changed after that town hall in a way. It was 9 days after the murder of George Floyd, and our CEO had pulled together a group of Black partners of the firm. And we weren't going to talk about capital markets, and we weren't going to talk about IPOs and M&A transactions. We were going to talk about our lived experience as Black professionals, which, you know, depending on who you are, you either step into that or you shy away from that. Very often, you know, as I talk to my colleagues, they say, look, at the beginning stage of my career, I don't want to talk about my womanhood, my Blackness, my identity. I really just want to be known as a beast about the work. And I feel like that potentially distracts from it. Then there are other people who are like, no, this is a component of who I am. And I can't put that aside until I've established my subject matter expertise. And I don't feel like I have to. They can be all one and the same, but people come at it from various perspectives. So I was one of the 3 partners that was asked to talk about my experience. And I thought, you know, in various moments, you lead with different things. You can lead with data. You can lead with your substance. You could lead with vulnerability. And in that moment, I thought, this is a moment where I need to lead with vulnerability. And I told him about what had happened the weekend before, where my then 11-year-old son had come to me and said that he saw the George Floyd video. And it was this moment as a mother of sort of loss of innocence that my little boy had seen this, someone murdered. And the thing he said, Max said, Mommy, he was calling for his mommy. And which, you know, he as an 11-year-old boy, you somehow think, you know, you stop calling for your mommy at some point, right? Don't I? I'm 11 already. And he said he was a grown up and he was calling for his mommy. And that was the thing that struck him the most. And I said, in this moment, as a Black mother, what I think about is, as he gets older, this is usually celebrated, like, you know, a bar mitzvah, a quinceañera, you know, different events to mark, you know, getting older. And as a Black boy gets older, there's a lot with fear. It's not necessarily celebration that you feel. You feel like, wow, you're getting really tall. Wow, we're going to have to, you know, have the talk. There's so many things that go into that other parents may not think about, and frankly, more worry about their safety. I grew up with a mother who was always looking out the window when my brothers, I have 3 brothers, were ever late. She could not sleep, and she would look out the kitchen window, and she would not go to bed until all 3 of her boys were back in the house. And you could see in her shoulders the relief that another day had passed and her boys were back home. And I thought, you know, am I destined to somehow pace as she did by the window, having 2 Black boys? And I shared with the town hall that my privilege, my education from Swarthmore and Columbia Law, my status at Goldman Sachs, my class, all of that does not insulate me from acts of racism, and my family from a different lived experience. And I wanted to make clear that the person you're sitting next to, their lived experience is not like yours when they leave here. And money doesn't change that. And education and degrees after your name doesn't change that. We've got to change it as a collective and as a society. And so that was what the town hall was really about. My colleagues, Margaret Onadu and Earl Hunt, also shared about their experiences. And there was really a sort of outpouring that led to a lot of other conversations. And ultimately, a year later, the launch of 1 Million Black Women, the largest commitment ever. So it's been an incredible year.
Yeah, I mean, talk to us about 1 Million Black Women. It's so impressive. And I'd love to hear about how that came about, you know, the thinking behind it, starting at the town hall, and how you put it together, and how it's starting.
Yeah, I have to give kudos to, you know, a team of people at Goldman Sachs, Margaret Onadu, Dina Powell, and David Solomon, our CEO, John Rogers. Nothing happens, you know, in a vacuum alone. It's a whole group of people that are involved in sort of building and approving something like this. You know, ultimately, you know, people can come up with the idea, but it takes the CEO to say, yes, Goldman Sachs is going to do this. And our CEO, David Solomon, was 100% behind it from the very beginning. But essentially, it really looked at this report that we published called Black Womenomics. And it looked at Black women in the world. And I'll share this with you, which I'm sure your audience knows, but there's a 90% wealth gap between a Black woman in this country and a white man. And that number is large enough. But as you come down to it, you see, well, what does that mean in numbers? Well, that means that the net worth of a Black woman is roughly $7,000. And the net, that's all her assets, everything combined, it's $7,000. And then for a white male, it's $92,000. And then I thought about that disparity, but then I also thought about, what about the children to that Black woman and the white man? What about the household? What about the spouse, the family member, all of that network, and what it means, not just for the individuals, but all the people around it? And what if we as Goldman Sachs could try to close that racial wealth gap in a real trackable way, and hopefully inspire other financial institutions and others more broadly to be a part of closing that racial wealth gap? Well, the report found that if we did that, we're able to do that, we would be able to increase US GDP by $450 billion. Wow, which kind of blows my mind, right? And that's not just helping Black people, that's helping our
Everyone,
country, everyone. So that then got us all excited, and and then all the work began.
And so tell us a little bit about the mechanism by which you're putting this initiative in place. What exactly does it do?
Okay, this is the creative part, and I think the important part. It follows along the arc of a Black woman's life, and it invests in key moments of her life. Now, key moments in a Black woman's life are the key moments in all of our lives, right? She's born. So it looks at, maternal fetal outcomes of Black women. We live in a country with the best healthcare system in the world. Yet in New York City, Black babies are dying at a rate 12 times the rate of white babies, right here in New York City. So we said, well, could we invest in Black women as it relates to maternal health? And we would invest in hospitals. We would invest in Black more midwives, more Black nurses. Could that be a way in which we invest? So the investment thesis looks at the arc of life and then invest. So healthcare is one of them. A second one is education. Educational outcomes, and you know this better than I do, that roughly at 6 months, a Black child and a white child have comparable cognitive abilities. But by the age of 2, you see the disparity starting to show, and it gets only greater in terms of the words that they're hearing, the multiplicity of words that they're hearing. So education, could we invest more in schools, early childhood education, daycare facilities that are also teaching reading and things like that? So it follows along that life arc all the way to retirement.
And education for parents in terms of how to make sure that and help their kids along in this environment, which is such an important part of getting kids ready for school.
Yeah, financial literacy, which you mentioned earlier, is another one, which we all need.
We all need it, yeah. So tell me, how do you, it's such a big initiative. How do you measure success? And how do you know whether one aspect is working more so than another? I think, a company like Goldman really has such a fantastic platform here, because you're not running on a 4-year political cycle in the same way that a politician might be. You can have this long-lasting change, and you can go from the whole arc of the lifespan. How do you figure out what's working and what's not? And do you iterate? Do you change? You must. Mm-hmm. But there, along with what I think is such a great way to look at how you have an impact, assessing it becomes really, I would imagine, difficult as well.
Indeed, but I would say 3 things that we thought we've been thinking about. One is it's a 10-year initiative. So we want to be able to do this over a 10-year period. And you're exactly right, which is we will iterate as we go during that 10 years. So I imagine that in 3 years, the program won't look exactly the way that it looks now, but I think its key tenets of investing in the arc of life, I think will remain the same. The second thing that we're doing is we're listening. And this is a humble Goldman Sachs. This is a listening Goldman Sachs that says those closest to the problem are often closest to the solution, but nobody asks them, right? They say, well, this is what you need. And so we start off the initiative saying, you know what? We're going to have listening tours. And we've had over 6,000 women that have participated in listening in our listening tours. We opened it up to the public once we launched the initiative across the country to bring their ideas. And so that's been really, really rich for, I don't think we were as focused on midwives, right? And the number of Black midwives. If you'd asked me how many Black midwives there are, I would have said, I'm not sure. But there's a whole movement of Black midwives in this country. And how did I learn that? I learned that from the listening tours that said, if you want to impact healthcare, yes, you can think about hospitals, but you should also think about alternative to hospital care. And so that's been so incredibly fertile, these ideas that have been coming up from the community. And we have a phenomenal advisory council, Condoleezza Rice, Valerie Jarrett, Dr. Montgomery Rice. I could go on and on. Aisha Curry, some star power, like Steph Curry. And so the advisory council is also helping a lot. So I think we're listening. We've got a phenomenal group of advisors. You're 100% right. We're going to continue to iterate, and we're going to publish reports. I want the public to hold us accountable. And we want to hold ourselves accountable. You don't go out and say, we're going to help 1 million Black women without making damn sure that you're going to.
And I mean, I imagine there's always pressure to do things quickly, right? But you're dealing with systemic inequality and systems that take a time to change. And so how do you balance that, trying to sort of have these quick results with doing something that's really meaningful? Are there things that you're looking at that are more sort of low-hanging fruit? And because you want to keep people excited and you want to keep people interested in understanding how urgent this problem is.
I just love talking with you because this is exactly sort of the debate that we have, right? Where, there is this push to say, let's do all of these things now. And I'm like, no, it's a 10-year initiative, right? And we are Goldman Sachs. We are substantive. We are dedicated to making sure that our impact is real and true in all that we do. And so, yes, a certain amount of this we'll be able to do rapidly. And we've already issued our first set of grants and done our first set of investments, starting with the Morehouse Medical Center is one of the first ones, a $3 million commitment to Morehouse Medical Center to really build a medical village there. And so we've come out with some big ones already. That being said, I fight the pressure to say that we've got to do all of them right away, because that's PR, and that's not what this is about. This is about substantive change and closing the racial wealth gap, and that is going to take some time to make sure that we're making the right decisions along the way.
And listening to the right people. I mean, talking to 6,000 women takes time, right? And so to be able to make sure that what you're doing is going to really have an impact, you've got to spend that time understanding what it is that needs to happen. I love, anyone who knows me knows that I talk about data constantly, but I love that, data is this theme that's running through everything that you're talking about, which I imagine is a theme that runs through Goldman Sachs writ large. And I love how it's not separate, right? This is also about data. It's about seeing, it's obviously you're really changing lives here, but you're actually understanding what the mechanisms are needed of change are and really having an impact there.
Yeah, exactly.
So well, I could keep on talking, but we have so many questions from the audience, so I'm going to turn to those. And it's really just so impressive to hear everything that you're doing. Okay, so let's start here. We have a question from Emily Nee, who's class of 24. She's the current student, and she says, what's the best advice you have for each summer in college? I think this is a great question. Our Barnard students are hard driving and they want to make the most out of every moment they have. So what do you suggest? She wants to know after first year, second year, third year, or maybe just some general tips.
Wow. So I would say a couple of things. Take classes that you actually want to take, that you're genuinely interested in. The whole notion that you're going to stack your transcript with classes that are going to make an employer happy. At the end of the day, I'm going to see you in that interview. Was it Emily?
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to see you in that interview, Emily, and I'm going to relate to what you're talking about, a spark of something that I see in you. And so it's not going to be because you took this, particular set of courses. So I would say that one, take things that you actually are interested in and you really want to take. Two, I would say, think broadly about your career and don't feel like you have to have figured it all out. There is no way I could tell you at your age, when I was your age, that I would end up, one, at Goldman Sachs. I would probably said, Wall Street, I'm not really sure that that's right for me. And two, that I would be heading the Office of Corporate Engagement doing social impact. I would have said, oh my gosh, I'm not sure that that's really what I would be doing either. So you can't quite predict these, but what you can do is think expansively about where you could end up and being flexible around opportunities as they open themselves. Then I would say talk to a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are so excited about you and your trajectory in your life, and hearing their different experiences, you'll be able to bank things that worked for them and things that didn't work for them as well.
And people love talking about themselves and being asked questions. I think oftentimes students are afraid to reach out to alums. They don't want to bother them. We have this whole system called Barnard Connect, where alums have raised their hand to be resources. And I have to say, like, people like getting asked questions like this. It's fun to be able to talk about insights. And I always like talking about the fact that I had no idea where I was going. And I had 10 different majors my first year, and that's okay. I think we have to also be okay with some of that uncertainty. Okay, so I have a question from Daniela Young, who's a staff member, and she asked, how do you think the shifting environment of the workplace will impact corporate America and its employees? So I imagine some of this has to do with remote work, where we are. Talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, this whole notion of the future of work has been a rich discussion at the firm and externally. Now, we've gone back to the office fully. And so Monday morning, Goldman Sachs was back, New York office is open. And this Monday, and we've had food trucks outside and lots of different activities. And the buzz in the office has been really incredible. And in addition, like, you have to think about, well, we have working mothers for whom, school is not yet closed, right? For me, my kids are at public school, the boys, public school's over next Friday. Some camps are open, some camps are still, trying to figure out what they'll be doing for the summer. And so I think a balance, it's a return to I don't think it's a return to what was before. I think people have figured out that, Zoom is here to stay, as much as we love it or have a love-hate relationship with it. But I really do think it's here to stay. I think, imagine, 2 years ago when someone said, you want to do a video call? And everyone's like, what? Not really. Yeah, we'll do a conference call. And now we all hop on like it's second nature, right? And so I feel like, a lot of those things, we're not going to go back. And I think a certain amount of flexibility, not only do people want, but they need, and frankly, they've proven, quote unquote, to employers, they do it well, right? It works. And so I think we're going to have to be intentional about, keeping some of the flexibility that we've been able to gain. But I think, the narrative, I think, is still being written because I think there are different people who think, FaceTime and lots of other things. So I think we're still going to have to figure it out. Engineering, technology is another area where likely there'll be a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, I love this idea of being intentional. It's something I've written about, this notion that, if we just say, well, everyone can work flexibly, we know that some people have more responsibilities outside the office, whether it's working mothers or women of color. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're not getting that face time with people who you want to think about in line for promotions as you're trying to diversify who's at the top. And so I think we do have to be really intentional to make sure that there aren't these unintended consequences of just having all flexibility. And iterate. It comes back to iterating. I think we have to be okay with acknowledging that what we put out there at first might not work perfectly, and we're going to learn and we're going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a question from Julia Luby, who's a class of 18. She's an alumna, and she asked, what qualities are lacking among women leaders today? It's a big question. Or what qualities should women leaders make sure they have if we want to turn it to the positive, or any leader for that matter?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna answer the question very directly, but I'm also gonna say it's a mass generalization. But you knew that when you asked me the question. So I would say one, a certain amount of sort of risk taking and being more leaned into taking more risk. And when I say that, I mean risk on yourself as well. Like the job description asks for these 5 things, and you've got 3 of them. Apply for the job. And so. Or, someone's applying to work for you and you said, I really think Emily from before could really do this job, but she doesn't have exactly the background we're looking for. shall I second guess 10 times what my boss is going to think, or I'm going to hire Emily and invest in Emily and she's going to be able to do it. And so I think, greater risk taking, and this is speaking for myself, I think earlier on in my career, to being unapologetic about being a woman and a mother and all the other things, and having other priorities in my life. I've become that way now, and frankly, people are perfectly fine with it. I've got to go to a soccer game. Okay, we'll see you in a little bit. If I'm going to be back, and they know I'll be back, and if I need to stay on or do something over the weekend, as very often I do, it's not a problem. But being less apologetic, and taking more risk, and I think being almost too thankful for opportunities. You deserve the opportunities that you get, and I think maybe taking on a little bit more sort of stereotypically male bravado around some of it might be good.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about these findings that on average women tend to be less likely to think they can do the next thing based on their qualifications compared to men. And one of my favorite studies to point to is that a man and a woman get a B in a business school class, and the man thinks that he can go on and get an A in the next class, and the woman isn't as sure, right? And so you have the same qualifications, and of course these are generalizations, it's on average, but it's that ability to really sometimes just push down the doubt and push forward. And remind yourself of the successes. We know from my research, from others, that actually narrating for yourself your successes, why you can do this, when you thought you would fail and you didn't. It's so important, because I always talk about that the most important conversation you're going to have is with yourself. And we're sometimes the worst critics of ourselves. Like some of the things you say to yourself, I mean, maybe not you, Asahi, but me, I would never say to a friend when I'm pumping them up. Right. And so we've got to be a little nicer to ourselves and a little more cheerleaders for what we're doing.
I couldn't agree with you more. I love that push down the doubt and push up more of the, sort of self-empowerment. I love it.
And it's a muscle. I mean, you have to practice doing it. It's something that often doesn't come naturally. Okay, so here's a great one. This is from Samuel Moore, who's on staff, and he says, "What's the best advice you've ever received?"
Oh, I've gotten so much good advice from so many incredible leaders. I think this is for your recent grads or people who are going to graduate soon. But one of my colleagues who since left the firm, his name is Bunty Bora, he said, burn the boat. And what his whole notion is when you've considered a certain path and you say, okay, I want to join this company, for instance, and you say, okay, great. And then you join the company, and within 6 months, you're like, well, should I and could I? Is this the right place for me? And he said, think about the decision you make as an island, and you went there on a boat and you burned the boat. And so really cast your eyes, not on what could have been, but where you are right now and how you're going to maximize this opportunity. Now, there may come a time where you may need to cut down some trees and build another boat and get the heck off that island. But in the meantime, give it the time it needs. No career is a straight line. It's going to be bumpy. And so burn the boat. And if you have that notion, sometimes the rougher days you get through it and you're like, you know what, that was just a rough day. This is the right place for me. Now, at some point, it's been helpful along the course of my career. And so I would say, remember, burn the boat.
I like that. I think I'm going to use that. And it's an easy phrase to remember. So, you are a powerful woman leader, you have children, how do you make time for yourself and caring for yourself? And do you have any tips for the rest of us?
I know that, I really believe in the buckle, up yourself before you buckle up others. And I'm a secret introvert. I may not appear to be, and most people at the firm, when they hear that, they're like, oh, I don't believe you, Asahi, but I really am. So I genuinely need time to myself. It's not even an option, but I just need it. And so I go for walks. I live across the street from Central Park. You'll see me walking around the park. I walk up to the campus. I walk up to Barnard and to the Columbia, and I walk down. I'm on 82nd Street. And so I walk a lot, and I take care of myself. There are times when I say, mommy's going to go for a walk, and they know, they're, 11 and 13, and they're fine with that. And so, or I need to go see my parents. During COVID, I hadn't seen them for a while. And I said, you know what? It's been too long. It's been 9 months, and my parents, we are very close. And I flew down to Miami to see my parents. And so I sort of check in with myself to see what am I need at this point in time. And, I do that caring and feeding. Because otherwise I can't do all that I do. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of focus. And I've got to be strong to be able to do that. And I know the things that strengthen me are close connections with friends and family, and also some alone time to sort of walk and think.
Yeah, that ability to take a step back. And I think a lot of us are working on how we keep that from the last 16 months. The ability to step back, and thinking is so important and underrated, I think, and taking that time. Well, Asahi, it's been wonderful to hear from you. You're such an inspiration. I love this idea that, paths are not linear, that you didn't know where you were going to be, and that you've really just, taken opportunities as they've come, and what you're doing at Goldman and is really fantastic. And I'm sure a lot of our students will at some point be working there or working for you or interested in helping in some way. And I look forward to seeing you on one of those walks and waving, but I'll give you your alone time.
Oh, I would absolutely love it. And I just want to say thank you and AJ and the entire Barnard community. I really hope we'll have tons more Barnard women at Goldman Sachs. So please reach out. I'm greedy for Barnard talent, so that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great match. Well, thank you again. What a fantastic way to conclude the season. I think we'll take this all off. And now I will turn it over to AJ and Beyond Barnard to conclude what was really a fantastic event.
Thank you so much, President Beilock. And thanks also to Asahi Pompey for joining us this evening. Though Insights powered by Barnard will go on hiatus until September, summer is really in full swing at the college. Over the next 10 weeks, a remarkable 242 students will complete faculty-mentored STEM research as part of the Summer Research Institute. This is by far the largest and most diverse cohort in the program's history, and a demonstration of Barnard's continued strengths in the sciences. And thanks to the generosity of individual donors and philanthropic organizations, the college is able to support nearly 100 interns financially through the Beyond Barnard internship program this summer. It is always really gratifying to see students returning to their internships, and especially exciting to see them in person and hybrid this summer after last summer's mostly virtual work. We are, as always, impressed with the creativity and hard work of Barnard students across the summer season. You'll be able to follow along with students participating in SRI or completing internships right here in New York and around the world on our Instagram, which I always promote at Beyond Barnard, so join us there. But finally, I wanted to extend my continued thanks to the staff of Beyond Barnard, whose efforts across the last 15 months during this extraordinary pandemic have just been incredible. The support of students and alumni demonstrates their deep commitment to this community. I'm always so grateful for that commitment and to their basically unflappable energy and enthusiasm to advance and support the careers of students and alumni in the Barnard community. So thank you again for joining us, everyone. We will see you in the fall. In the meantime, I hope your summers are healthy, fun, and hopefully full of adorable puppies. Good night.